Hello, and welcome to the latest Winston Churchill Memorial Trust webinar. Today we're going to be talking about how to use social media and blogging to communicate findings from your fellowship. We hope you'll come away from this webinar with some helpful information and ideas for how you can use these tools to promote your own work. My name is Ben Anstis. I'm the Communications Officer at the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust. And with me I've got a panel of 3 amazing Churchill Fellows who'll be talking about their experiences of using social media and blogging. Joining me in the WCMT offices today, we have Toby Carr, an architect who led a sea kayaking expedition to explore the northern extremities of the shipping forecast. Hello, Toby.
Hi.
And also we have Siobhan Tai, a broadcast journalist who travelled to Sweden and the USA to find out about prison radio stations that are accessible to the wider public. Hello, Siobhan.
Hello, Ben.
And also joining us on the line from Belfast, we have Shifra Kafti, a designer, educator and activist who travelled to Canada, Denmark, Switzerland and the USA to study zero waste initiatives. Hi, Shifra.
Hi, Ben.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good.
Before we start the discussion, we'd like to draw your attention to a guide to blogging that we've recently created, which features some sort of information and tips we hope you'll find helpful as well. You can download that by logging in, not blogging, to our website and going to the Fellows Resources page. We're going to speak to our 3 panelists for about 20 minutes, and then you'll have the chance to put your questions to them. You can find instructions for submitting your questions in the email we sent you yesterday. So I'm going to start by talking to Shifra. So Shifra, before we start talking about your blogs and social media, could you just tell us a bit more about what you researched on your fellowship?
Yep, so you can hear me okay, yeah?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So I was researching zero waste approaches to design, education and community. So I travelled throughout Europe and North America looking at best practice examples of how zero waste is being used to inform design studios, design education, and then how it's working in communities. So I visited like factories that were using waste material for making products. I visited like leading design institutions like Parsons in New York and met with the educators there that were teaching through zero waste and kind of trying to understand how do you teach something like this and the importance of it. And also like I visited a lot of like food cooperatives and looked at how they were using zero waste to share food and to build strong communities.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay, and so you blogged, and you also used Twitter and Facebook while you were in your fellowship, but it was Instagram was the tool that you found to be most effective. Could you tell us a bit about how you used Instagram and the impact it had?
Yeah, so I have my own business called Jump the Hedges, and through Jump the Hedges, I make bags also, and I use Instagram to promote and showcase and sell my products. So I combined this with my my fellowship, and I used the blog because I already had a following on the blog, or sorry, not the blog, the Instagram. I used this as the kind of the platform to start developing it further. And I used just the regular kind of Instagram, like where you like post images. Like I'm sure a lot of people have maybe their own personal Instagrams where they just post images of like their family and friends, but mine is public and it's a business account, and then you can all go on, have a look at it and see what I got up to. And I use the normal format of just posting images, and then I also use the format of stories. And Instagram stories is a hugely strong tool to use because you can promote through video, through imagery, whatever you want. And it reaches a huge amount of people, and like a lot of my Instagram stories, as they're called, would have reached maybe 600 or 700 viewers. So I was getting a huge amount of people from all different areas, and for me it was the only way really to communicate with people on such an international level. Facebook was really like not useful at all, to be honest. Like you're able, whenever you do an Instagram story or an Instagram post, you're able to link it to all your accounts. So you can post it on Facebook at the exact same time, on Tumblr and on Twitter. You can post it all at the one time. So I would have done that, but Instagram was definitely the most important way for me to reach anyone.
And just for the uninitiated, could you just sort of briefly explain what an Instagram story is?
Yeah, so on Instagram, you like whenever you go on your Instagram like platform as such, you've got loads of like tiny little squares, and you can just put photographs into that. But an Instagram story, you click on your actual profile image, and you like your phone basically shows up the camera mode, so you can use an image that's already you've already saved on your phone, or else you can take a live photo, you can take a live video, and if you take like a live video, all of your followers are notified that you're taking a live video. So this is a really good way to get people, like if you're like every single person, like I think I've 1,700 followers, and if I do a live video, 1,700 people are notified at the one time. Jump the Hedges is currently recording a live video, so it's a really good way to get in touch with people really quickly. With regards to kind of figuring it all out, it is all very straightforward, but there are different like YouTube tutorials and all that kind of stuff. And once you get the hang of it, it's very, very, very easy. And I've realized that the most simple stuff is the best. There's certain bloggers and people that post too much stuff, but I would have maybe only posted maybe once or twice a day, but this was more than enough. And it also for me was something to kind of keep me busy while I was on my fellowship, and it was nearly all that kind of promotion and documentation was really good now for me writing up my report, because I have all of it documented and recorded.
Okay, fantastic. And sort of if someone was new to Instagram, or a Churchill Fellow was new to Instagram and was interested in using it, what kind of advice would you give to them?
I would say just be confident and go ahead and use it, because I think people have the issue of, oh, what if my images aren't good enough? What if it just doesn't right? But you can always go back and delete things, and you have to remember, like I'm sure some of you might be graphic designers, but I'm sure most of you aren't. You're not pretending to be a graphic designer, and for me, like I'm not pretending to be a photographer or a graphic designer. Like I'm a product designer, so some of my images, all of my images I've taken myself, and when I've had professional images, I've always credited photographers. But you know, you kind of just have to be confident in putting things forward, and just realize that you're not a photographer, and you just have to just put it out there, really. And I think people nearly engage more with badly taken images than they do with really professional.
A bit more human.
More human, and it's a bit unrealistic, all these like superficial like images. And another thing that I noticed hugely is that, like, with regards to like people liking your photo and engaging with it, people will engage hugely with photos or imagery when I am in it myself, or when there's humans, when there's people in it, and they engage much more with that than they do with like landscapes or just things like that. Like as soon as I put up an image of like me, like for example in San Francisco, I went out with, as part of the Global Action Climate Summit, I was like planting trees in the Tenderloin, and like I put images up of that, and people, like, I got so many questions and comments, and people really engaged with that because they could see human interaction, really. So just keep it real and just be confident in putting things out there, and if you really don't like it after a few weeks, you can go back and delete things.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you so much, Shifra. We're going to move on now, but please stay on the line, because we will have some questions later from the listeners. But thank you so much for that. That was really, really interesting. So we're going to go to Toby next. So Toby, your fellowship was rather unique. Could you just tell us briefly a little bit more about what you did on your fellowship travels?
Yeah, so I carried out a sea kayaking expedition, which was essentially a series of journeys through different areas of the UK shipping forecast, which really formed a framework for what I was going to do on the trip. So that took me to Iceland, to the Faroe Islands, Norway, Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, and then sort of finally back to London, which would be Thames in the forecast. So what I was doing along the way was, I suppose there were different avenues that I was trying to explore with the project. One was it was part personal challenge for myself. Secondly, it was a way of trying to meet with people who were kind of engaged in the same activity in different areas, and to find out more about kind of what they got from it, kind of how we could maybe try and encourage more people to make use of the outdoors, and I suppose what made it special for them. So I was also interested in the cultural side of things as well, because the shipping forecast has a sort of place in our cultural history in the UK, I suppose, of cultural identity, and I was interested just to probe that a bit and to find out about what it might mean, or what similar things might mean for people in other countries, and so that was really interesting. So the way that I documented it was through collecting stories, recording audio clips, took a lot of pictures, and I sort of took some film footage as well. But I guess because there was a sort of physical element to the trip, I was literally kayaking from place to place along the coastline. I spent quite a lot of the time sort of on my own during the day doing that, and then would sort of land and be quite sort of tired as part of the expedition, sort of at the end of it. So it was different avenues to the fellowship.
Yeah, so interesting. And so you told me that you'd never blogged before this trip. Is that right? And so could you talk a bit about why you decided to blog about your fellowship, and also how you set up your blog?
Yeah, so I suppose I was a little bit scared of social media. I'm quite active on Facebook, but as you said, never blogged before. I hadn't used Twitter and I hadn't used Instagram, but I was interested in finding different ways that people could engage with my story and my journey, and for me the storytelling part of it was interesting and is interesting, and I thought that the blog could be a way to I suppose provide people with a more in-depth way of engaging with the project than just sort of you might see a photo and then find that interesting and then want to read a bit more about it. So I wanted to create those different levels of ways that people could engage with what I was doing. And I suppose the way I started to think about it was just by looking at blogs that other people had written and things that I might be interested in reading myself, and tried to structure what I was writing around the things that I thought might be interesting for other people. So I tried to avoid too much kind of technical kind of information, or sort of stuff to do with like exactly how far I'd been, or kind of how many calories I'd burned, or anything like that, which I wasn't really logging anyway. But so it was more story based, and that's why I found the blog useful.
Okay. And how did you approach writing sort of an individual blog post? Sort of what sort of subjects did you try and talk about?
So I had some really good advice before I left from the Churchill Trust and all of the information online, but also I made contact with some travel writers before I went, and one of the things that everyone said was that you must write down at the end of the day what you've been doing. Like it doesn't matter if it doesn't kind of tie together into sort of meaningful prose, just make a note of what you've been doing, because I think especially on a journey like a fellowship journey, you're sort of meeting so many different people and seeing so many different places and having different experiences one after another, and if you don't write down what you've been doing and sort of how it made you feel, kind of why it was useful and things like that at the time, it's really hard to recall it later. So I kept loads of notes. I also, if I was feeling too tired because I had a long day on the water, I actually sort of just recorded stuff into my phone or kind of onto a camera, which I never intended to share really. It was just as a way of kind of recording. And also, I suppose, because I spent a lot of time travelling between sections, that was a really good time to consolidate what I'd been doing and then kind of think about what was going to happen in the next place. So, it was a useful tool to kind of basically wrap up what I'd done in one area and then think about the next.
And what were the sort of results of your blogging? How did it kind of do what you hoped it would?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I didn't really know who was going to read it, and what's been really interesting is catching up with people when I've been back, maybe people that I already had connections with that have been reading it, and then finding out. I mean, I've got emails from people all over the place that maybe have an interest in the forecast or an interest in the story of what I'm sort of starting to do, and that's been amazing, really, because I think you just put something out there, you don't really know kind of who's going to respond to it, and so for me that was interesting, and it's helped me to make connections, I think, with people that I wouldn't have connected with otherwise, because they can find out a bit more about actually what I'm doing and what I might be interested in.
And so you use sort of Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to talk about your fellowship, as well as the blog. How did you go about sort of engaging people on those different platforms?
Bit of trial and error, really. I think the first thing was to get over the fear of it, in a way. We use Twitter and Instagram actually in my my work, and I was a bit apprehensive about going into it, and I think so it was a little bit of a test to how it might be useful. I found Twitter particularly was really useful for me as a way to connect with a much wider audience that might not be at all interested in the world of kayaking or kind of expeditioning or anything like that, but they're really interested in the cultural side of my fellowship.
Okay.
And so suddenly I was in contact with people that I never would have been in a network with before, and I think Twitter has been really useful for that. And Instagram, I found it useful actually, Instagram, as a way of editing through some of my photographs. So as a way of just thinking at the end of the day, kind of what's the most interesting thing that's happened today, or kind of which kind of image have I got that might best represent what I've been doing. And now I think, as we were just hearing, I think that's really useful for writing the report, because it's like things are already kind of slightly pre-edited.
Absolutely.
So I mean, I have a small following on both, like Twitter and Instagram. It's not like it's kind of like gone mad, but I do think it's a useful way to connect with people kind of outside of your kind of immediate network, and for people just to find out what you're doing, because they can sort of take it or leave it kind of thing, follow you and unfollow you, and it's sort of a bit more fluid, I think, than something like Facebook, which is kind of fixed.
Okay. Yeah, and you mentioned when we talked earlier about kind of tailoring your posts to each platform and thinking about what might work well for different audiences. Could you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I do this particularly well, but and I think there is a danger that we were talking about this just before, that if you kind of throw yourself into the social media platforms, you can feel kind of quite stressed out by it, because you feel like you constantly have to put updates, and you constantly have to kind of let everyone know what you're doing, and I think that is something that is worth managing, particularly if you're new to using it. But I suppose I just try to think about kind of what might be interesting for the audience that I think I've got on Twitter, and they're probably more interested in reading like a short summary of what I'm doing and where I am. And on Instagram, I've noticed that the people that are kind of following it are maybe from a slightly different kind of network, and they're sort of interested in sort of pictures of different landscapes or different places I might be. And Facebook I've kind of used as a way to kind of repost some of the blog posts that I've been writing along the way. So
yeah, great, fantastic. Okay, well, we're going to move on to Siobhan now. Siobhan, could you tell us a bit more about the topic you researched on your fellowship?
Yeah, so I did a project which was all about prison radio, and the reason why I did that was because when I got my fellowship, I was on secondment to the Ministry of Justice as the head of prison radio.
Right.
And not many people know that in prisons there's a prison radio station made by prisoners for prisoners, but let's say you turn on your radio at home, a normal radio, you can't tune into it. So you can only listen to it within the walls of a prison. And the main objective is rehabilitation. So there's lots of rehabilitation messages on there. For presenters who are prisoners, they acquire lots of skills, such as presentation skills, putting forward an argument, putting forward a discussion in a fluent way, in a way that's engaging. So there's lots of literacy skills attached to it.
And is that national?
So it's across the whole prison estate in England and Wales, because prisons are devolved. So it's not in Northern Ireland and it's not in Scotland, although Scotland has got its own radio project going. So anyway, what I wanted to do was go to other countries where you could listen to programmes on your normal radio at home when you're in the kitchen making a dinner or something, which are made by ex-prisoners, addressing issues around prison life. And I weighed up the merits of that and the risks of that. So that's hopefully gives you some idea of my project.
Yeah, sounds so interesting. So why did you decide to blog about your fellowship, and how was your experience of blogging?
Yeah, so my fellowship was about 3 years ago, so a little bit further back in time compared to our other two guests. And before I went, everyone was telling me, oh, you must blog, you must do something online about this. And like Toby, I felt an enormous amount of pressure when it came to that. But I felt, okay, I should do it. I should kind of dive in the water here. And what I decided to do was get a free blog making site through Wix, W-I-X. And you can pay for the service, but I decided that I didn't want to. But what it does, it provides you with a template, and you can be as flashy and as complicated as you want to be, and you can play around with it. And the reason why it helped me was, one, it allowed me to kind of keep in touch with people at home, or them keep in contact with what I was doing and the progress of my work. And it was good from a safety point of view. People knew where you were, actually. And actually, because you're travelling on your own, it's a really nice thing to do at the end of the day, if you have the energy, unlike Toby, who's kind of kayaking around the British Isles and even further afield. It's a really nice thing to do, to kind of make sure you keep up with what you've learnt that day, analyse it a bit, process it a bit, and actually it's incredibly helpful when it comes to you being back home writing the report, because it's all there in a kind of digital diary, if you like. So I found, actually, once I kind of dived into the whole blogging thing, it was really useful.
Great. Okay. And when we talked a bit earlier, you mentioned that when you wrote a blog post, you thought about what was newsworthy from your trip. Can you talk a bit about that and how you approach writing a blog post generally?
Yeah, so I'm a broadcast journalist, so I'm used to telling stories. So one piece of advice I would give is kind of keep your story length quite short. And really focus on the pictures. People love seeing pictures. And again, it was mentioned earlier in this webinar, people like seeing pictures of other people. Having said that, because I'm a very cautious social media person, there isn't a picture of me on my website. And that's for two reasons. One, as I said, because I'm cautious and I'm quite shy, but there's another reason, because of my job. I prefer to keep kind of under the radar a little bit. And that is a piece of advice that I would give out. I would really kind of look inside yourself and say to yourself, how public do I want to go, and how comfortable am I being public, and will it be beneficial if I'm really public? I mean, for our first speaker it was, because she has her business from the sounds of it, and it's a really good idea. And Toby, I don't know how you feel, but you'd like your project to keep on going, so maybe it's important for you to be more public. Again, I just made the decision I wanted quite a low profile. Does that answer your question? I don't know. I've rambled a bit.
No, that's a good answer. No, I guess it's, what you're putting at the forefront, whether it's sort of the issues or whether you need to put yourself in the story as well.
Yeah, and I suppose putting yourself in the story is an interesting one because I'm a broadcast journalist. The stories I do are not about me. I put other people at the front of the story rather than me. There's very few stories that I've done where I'm at the centre of them, and there needs to be a really good editorial reason to do that. Thinking from an editorial point of view as well, because your content is so public, just be very careful about what you write.
Absolutely.
Because you need to be content that other people are going to be content, happy with what you've written. It is a public platform after all, so don't libel anyone. Don't defame anyone. If it's your opinion, say it's your opinion.
Okay.
And also, if you're working with vulnerable people, and many fellows will be working with people who have vulnerabilities in one way or the other, maybe possibly with children, just be really aware of using their photos online, I'd say. I'm drawing on my broadcast journalism here, but I think there are lots of factors around social media, and consent is one of them. And not everybody will want their picture on your website.
Yeah, I think that's true, but I think, I really agree with what you're saying. You have to treat it quite carefully depending on who you might be working with and the story you're trying to tell. I think also what I found was a brilliant offshoot of maybe keeping the blog or having an Instagram post. It sort of gives you an excuse for saying to someone, oh, I'm writing this blog, can I ask you about this? Or, I mean, obviously the fellowship project is kind of the bigger reason for kind of doing those things. But say if you want to take a picture of you doing something, you can kind of say, oh, I've got this Instagram feed, do you mind if I take a picture of us doing this together? And it, for me, that sort of sometimes made it easier just to kind of sort of ask those questions to people and sort of also maybe gauge consent at the same time. So, I mean, I agree with you. You just have to treat it quite carefully.
No, but you're right. It's a good reason to get those images as well.
But the one thing I would say is kind of digital platforms move on so quickly.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether I would do a blog again.
Okay.
But 3 years ago, Twitter and Instagram, they certainly weren't as popular as they are now. I think I would probably go the Twitter way now if I was doing my fellowship.
Okay. And how did you find sort of people reacted to your blog? Did you?
People were really positive about it, but it was a great way of saying, especially when I came back, that I've been involved in this. Look at this blog, because it meant it was a shortcut, a signpost to what I've been doing. I think from the point of view of the people that I encountered and interviewed on my research trip, it kind of gave my trip some authority, if they could see that they were involved in a project rather than... Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think
kind of gave a little bit of credibility to it, or else I could have been anybody rocking up. Okay, I did have a lovely business card from Winston Churchill Memorial Trust saying who I was. But it was nice for people to follow up the experience of meeting me with seeing their story on my blog. And seeing it in context with the other people that I've met elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, and I guess it shows sort of where you're coming from in a way that a business card obviously doesn't.
Yeah, I totally had that experience as well, that people that I met at the beginning of my fellowship were really excited to follow what I was going to be doing in kind of, say, a month's time. And so you sort of almost collect
community.
Followers, a community kind of as you go. And it was a brilliant tool for doing that.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Ron. That's so interesting. I think we're going to hand over to questions now from our listeners. If you've got any questions for Toby, Siobhan, or Shifra, or just questions generally, please send them in now. I believe we've got a couple in. So one person says, hi, can I ask if you blog simultaneously alongside your Instagram story, and if so, what platform do you use? And that's a question for Shifra.
Okay, so I have, and kind of, because I was already set up as a business, it probably was activity for me. So I had gone through the big kind of slightly intimidating thing about up like the other lady was talking about the Wix. I use Workspace.
Sorry, Shifa, your line's a bit crackly at the moment. Is there anything you can maybe try and do about that? I don't know. Have you moved or?
Unless no, I'm still in the same boat. That might matter. What? Or all in the
Would it be worth? Maybe you could try logging in again, logging in and out. I don't know if that might help. Okay, we'll try and get Shifa back. Sorry about that, but we'll move on to the next question if that's okay. So the next question is: what choices did you make between frequent diary-style blogs and more considered longer pieces which could slot more easily into the final report? Would you, Tobys, Siobhan, would you like to?
Yeah, for me it was almost relatively easy to make that decision because I was using a pre-formed framework of these different areas of the forecast that I was visiting different countries, and so between those areas, as I said, I was travelling from place to place, and so that was a really good time to just consolidate kind of a longer post. So I was keeping a journal kind of that I was writing for myself, but in terms of the blog posts, I always did them so that was one per area, which probably related to about a week's worth of travelling, and they're probably longer than they ought to be. I mean, but yeah, I think kind of more than that, I would have found kind of just too much to kind of be doing.
Yeah.
I didn't do mine daily. I think I did maybe 3 blog posts a week, possibly, but it's all about merit. So if you had a day when you met someone really interesting that deserves writing up, I'd say I did 2 paragraphs per post. So I'm guessing that was roughly, I want to say 500 words. I don't know why, I'm just visualizing it now, but maybe something along those lines.
Yeah.
But I relied on it heavily for the report when I came back.
Interesting.
Heavily. It was like a digital diary.
Yeah.
I didn't write, apart from very sketchy notes, I didn't write anything in the notebook. I used that platform.
Right. And as you were saying earlier, I guess you found it useful for some processing and analysing your thoughts.
Yes.
As you're experiencing things.
Yeah, exactly. So I was recording conversations I had, but also I was analysing those conversations and trying to draw something out of them.
Yeah, I guess I always think of blog posts as sort of being at their best when they're kind of about discrete subjects, so you don't try and say too much in one blog post. So yeah, I'd agree with that. Generally trying to keep it short and to the point. So we'll go to the next question. So how present was the blog or gathering photos, etc., in your mind whilst on your fellowship and in projects you were taking forward? Any tips for how to stay on top of getting your material or collecting material? Open questions. So yeah, maybe Sean, do you have any thoughts on that?
It was very on top of my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I took photographs of every person I met and every radio station I went to. Got so many photos of radio desks and faders, it would bore people. Stupid. But yeah, it was, I mean, but I found it useful as well. I mean, I found it a really useful and positive exercise when I went back to an empty hotel room and I was a bit lost for what to do.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think for me it was also very present in my mind. I think maybe because I would have long periods, like kind of 7 or 8 hours kind of on the water on my own, staring at a landscape, but I would be thinking, how would I describe this landscape to somebody that can't see it? So how would I describe what I'm doing or how I'm feeling? And I think that was really helpful. Like, it was definitely kind of present in my mind, like, how am I going to sort of tell this story? How am I going to sort of try and capture it? And I've also got hundreds of photos, but I think actually kind of maybe a description of what you're doing and how it links into something else is perhaps more useful. But
But I also did radio recordings.
Ah, yeah.
So I actually recorded people on mic because when I came home I really wanted to try and get some of those pieces on the radio.
Right.
So they were also another useful diary element.
Mm.
I would say the same actually as well. I've used camera and phone, and I had some mics with me, so I could just, if I felt that people maybe wanted to talk about what they were doing, I could record them doing it. And it's good to be prepared for that kind of thing, I think.
Mm. Yeah, I don't think we've got Shifa back yet, but when I was talking to her earlier, she was talking about how you really do, if you put the work in, you really do get the reward, so it is really worth staying on top of and really thinking of it as a big part of your fellowship. So yeah, I know she did put a lot of time into it, and as we heard earlier, really got the result.
I think also, I mean, she's said that she's not a professional photographer, but I think I do follow her posts on Instagram, and they're really engaging photographs. Yeah. I think definitely thinking about how people might engage with what you're putting there is important. And I think that's why Instagram's maybe a good filter, because it makes you kind of edit your stuff and think maybe more carefully about what you are posting.
Just a point on the photographs, I think your own photographs are the best, no matter what quality. But sometimes, what I did also is that I subscribed to a photo stock website, and I just put 10 or maybe £20 credit, which gave me about 10 or 20 opportunities to get some photos. And it just, if you're after a really stunning image, I mean, for instance, when I was in America, I just wanted a really stunning image of Washington.
Right.
And of course, I couldn't take a stunning image of Washington or a Washington monument on my little photo. It would never come out in the quality I wanted. So it's really useful. I think it's a good investment if you want that stunning image to get the interest.
Yeah, absolutely. So next question. Do either of you have any thoughts on vlogging? So that's video blogging on YouTube and on Facebook. So on either of those platforms. I know that Vimeo is also another platform that a lot of people use. So I don't think either of you did that during your travels. But,
no, I mean, as I said, I did record some footage of myself talking to camera, and it is quite interesting now watching it back. But I think the thought at the time, I would have been quite nervous about doing that. I think I wouldn't have felt comfortable kind of sort of posting videos of myself doing that. But I think it depends on your project. I think it's like you were saying earlier, how much of yourself do you want to put out there, kind of, or how much of what you're doing do you want to kind of put there? And if it's a useful way to get across what it is that you've been doing, then yeah, I think it's great. But probably the same with all of the other things that we've been talking about. You need to, I guess, be quite targeted about what it is that you're going to post. Like, people won't be that interested in you just rambling on about kind of what you've been doing all day, but if you've got something interesting, there's a snippet that might kind of pique their interest in something else, then I think it could be a really useful tool, but I haven't used it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think short is sweet always, but I also think it's about how comfortable you are with it. I mean, if you enjoy it, then why not? Yeah, go on ahead. Fill your boots. But again, it's just not for me, and I didn't want to feel pressurised into doing it if I got no enjoyment from it.
Yeah, and also I guess it's worth stressing that it really does depend on the audience you're trying to reach and whether sort of video is going to be the best way to engage them. And I think there are definitely projects where it will be, and others where it's not really suitable. I believe we have Shifa back. Shifa, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you better now.
Okay, perfect.
So yeah, can we get there was a question for you earlier. So someone was asking, can I ask if you blog simultaneously alongside your Instagram stories? And if so, what blog platform do you use?
So yes, I did. I did everything simultaneously because they're all actually linked probably because they're all owned by the same people is probably the reason why they're all so easily linked. But like whenever you post something to Instagram, you can post it automatically to Twitter, to your blog if you use Tumblr for your blog. There's so many different platforms for blogs. I did a master's about 3 years ago, and that was my first time ever looking at blogging, and it was very intimidating and overwhelming for me to use this because I just sort of felt like, oh, I don't want to put this out there. I don't want everyone looking at what I'm saying or doing. And it was like an online sketchbook. It was an online diary, and I put it out, and I think to date, like for that blog, like my master's blog, I think actually about a maximum of about 6 people have actually looked at it to date. So, you know, we kind of feel like everyone's going to look at it, but nobody really looks at it or cares. So I think you have to sort of remember that when you're putting something out, not to get too serious about it. So that master's blog definitely, like, it just was a way for me to document my work. And then for this, I used for that was Tumblr, which is a free platform, really nice, visually easy to use and very nice to look at. And then for this, I used my website builder, similar to what Siobhan was talking about earlier. She used Wix, and Squarespace is another version, but Squarespace is more expensive. And the reason why I use Squarespace is because it's my business website. Like, I sell my bags through it, and then so you have to pay for it because it's like a retail platform. But there are like cheap versions and stuff. But I wouldn't be telling people to go and get Squarespace. To be honest, I think that's too much of it's an unnecessary expense. But on mine, I was able to link my Instagram posts to my Squarespace. So it meant that I was doing one post and I was linking everything at the one time. And if they weren't linking, I literally was copying and pasting in. I wasn't rewriting things and spending ages trying to make it sound in different ways. I was putting the same information in different places because from what I could see, different viewers were looking in different places. The majority of people were Instagram, but then there was a different kind of viewer looking on the blog. So the same person wasn't reading the same thing twice.
Yeah, fantastic. And yeah, I meant to say as well that about Toby, you used a paid platform for your blog as well.
Yeah.
Could you just sort of mention why you did that and how that worked for you?
Yeah, well, interesting. So I did use Squarespace, and that was partly because so it's a web platform, and so it has the functionality of having a blog, but it also has the options for essentially acting like a website. And the reason I did it, I looked at using free platforms, which would have been absolutely fine for what I was doing, to record the stuff online, but I knew that my journey was going to continue on sort of past the sort of fellowship part of the travels, and I didn't quite know what it might grow into.
Yeah.
And so I suppose I took the call at the beginning that to avoid having to sort of reset something up later, I wanted a kind of platform that could grow into something else. So I can post videos on it, and I can put photo galleries and things about events and stuff like that. So it has more navigability for me to organise content on it. But I would agree with Shifra, yeah, sorry. That I certainly wouldn't necessarily recommend kind of everybody going out and doing that. I did it for quite a specific reason, and I think if you're just using the platforms to record your blog, there's loads of kind of different ways to do that.
Although we were talking before this, and I said to Toby, actually looking back, maybe I would spend the money now on a kind of more professional looking blog, just so that it looked nicer, just for vanity's sake, really.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of horses for courses, really, and it kind of depends as well on the scope of where your fellowship sits into, if it sits into a wider project, or in Shifra's case into her business as well. It speaks to that. And
one thing that I was looking at when I looked at the Squarespace setup was how it would appear on different devices. And obviously, like Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook are set up so they'll appear kind of on a tablet or on a computer, on a desktop or on a phone, whatever. And so, but it's worth thinking about kind of when you do set something up, kind of how will it appear on your device, but also kind of how will you be able to get access to it whilst you're travelling to update it. So I didn't take a laptop with me because I was on the water, and so I took like an iPad in a waterproof case, and so it was quite important that I could log into it kind of whilst I was away. But I was also in quite remote areas, and so sometimes there was no 3G or wireless signal or anything, so I couldn't update it anyway. And so I think there's sort of two sides of the thing there, kind of how might it appear to other people, but also how you can connect into it to update it.
Absolutely. Okay. Oh, sorry, Sean. Go on.
I just wonder where we'll be this time next year. Maybe there'll be
course.
a brand new platform that will be even better than everything that we've spoken about, because things are moving so quickly in the digital sphere.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess Instagram is certainly a lot bigger than it was a couple of years ago. So yeah, who knows what's coming next? We've got a couple more questions. Someone asked, do you think there is any value in writing things slightly differently for the different platforms, as the characteristics of users may be different? For example, younger folk using Instagram, which is certainly something we found, and Twitter being a bit more businessy. Any thoughts on that? We kind of touched on that, but any more?
Yeah, I think it's about addressing your audience. If you know the audience that uses one platform more than the other, then for sure, why not kind of alter the way you say things, of course. Yeah. You're not going to write for radio in the same way as you're going to write for TV or how you're going to write for papers. You have to alter the message depending on the medium.
That's very true. I agree with that.
I'd say see what other people are doing as well and what you find engaging. So I found when I first started to use Twitter, I could see kind of maybe other people that were posting sort of about things which might be related to my trip, but the things that I would read were the things that got my attention straight away. If I saw something that was just a link to something on Facebook, then I'd kind of be like, well, I'm not interested. So I think just maybe sort of try and think about kind of what would interest you if you were trying to follow somebody's sort of fellowship or journey or whatever.
Think of a headline, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have any thoughts on that, Shifra?
Yeah, I think that for me, what I found that was a lot of academics used Twitter, and still, like, my Twitter is very, like, I don't really use it that much at all, but I noticed that any of the kind of academic institutions or lecturers or educators that I wanted to get in touch with, if I could find them quite easily on Twitter, and they've used their Twitter a lot, while like maybe self-employed design studios or entrepreneurs and stuff, not so much. They were more Instagram people. So also with regards to like contacting people for interviews and stuff, I think you need to look at the different platforms too, because there were some people that I was trying to get in touch with, and like they were on Twitter but they didn't use the platform at all, and then also with regards to thanking people and saying like, thanks for having me. I would, like, for certain people I would put it up on Twitter, and then for other people I would maybe direct message to them on Instagram. And so I suppose it is, just knowing your audience and knowing, just literally looking at what they use and which they post on most regularly, and then using that.
Okay, thanks. I think this may be aimed at Siobhan. Someone's saying, have you found a good method for disseminating your audio recordings?
Yeah, I managed to get quite a few radio pieces on Radio 4, on the news programmes, on PM and on Today.
Right, fantastic.
Do you, when you're doing that, do you use something like SoundCloud or something to pitch something? Would you just pitch it to kind of an audience, or do you kind of post your sound recordings online somehow beforehand, or not?
No, well, I'm lucky enough to work in the same buildings as the news programmes, and it really is the old-fashioned way of knowing people,
right? And
going up to them and having a conversation. And they took my radio pieces. I mean, I'm a BBC staff member, so it's easier for me. But once they were broadcast, I did actually put them up on SoundCloud, and also put them up on the blog that I had created.
I guess it's useful to mention in terms of disseminating your findings and getting people to hear about them. We also did a a webinar earlier on influencing and trying to influence policy. So I'll send a link round to all the listeners with that, just so you have it as well. So I think that's all the questions. If you've got another question, type it in very quickly. But I think that's all for now. So thanks so much to everyone for listening, and for everyone who posted a question. And a massive thank you to our panelists today, who've been absolutely brilliant. And we really appreciate you taking the time to share your experiences with us. So I've mentioned that we've recorded this webinar, so we'll be posting it on our website very soon, and we'll send all the listeners a link to it once we have that. And don't forget to check out our guide to blogging, which I mentioned earlier. It's available in the Fellows Resources section of our website now. And also, this is one of a series of webinars we're hosting for Fellows. This is the last one for 2018, so I hope you have a good Christmas and New Year. But we'll be back in the new year, starting with a session on gaining publicity for your fellowship on the 23rd of January. Until then, goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.